Good morning and welcome. This is Moth News Live. I'm your host, Keith Walsh. It is 11 o'clock. It is September the 12th, 2025. And here are the headlines. We're keeping an eye on stories from Ireland and beyond that matter to the Moth audience. That's you. I'm looking at you specifically. Yeah, you with the hat on. Yeah, Charlie Kirk killed at Utah University event. This is the big story. It's pretty much um, everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, has died after being shot while speaking at Utah Valley University event. Officials have released surveillance video showing a suspect fleeing across a rooftop following the shooting. The FBI have already offered a reward of $100,000 for information leading to identification or arrest of the shooter. And many have raised questions about political violence, freedom of speech, and how extreme rhetoric plays out in real life. So, yeah, I mean, he's a divisive figure. I mean, you might refer to him as somebody, he's definitely right wing. Is he extreme right? That's up to other people to decide. Um, I mean, condolences to his wife, and I believe he had two children. Not good, and we don't like to speak ill of the dead. Um, but he did, through his work, through the things he spoke about availability of guns. Interestingly, the university where he was shot had recently changed laws so that people could open carry firearms on the university campus as long as they were over 18, which seems wild. We don't understand it, but it's a US thing. It's to do with the Constitution, and yeah. But I mean, it's crazy that he spoke up for and in support of firearms and people being able to defend themselves, which is a constitutional right in a lot of states in America. And he ended up being killed at a university where they allowed people to open carry firearms as long as they're over 18, which, as an Irish person, it seems absolutely crazy. We have our own history with guns and violence, and, that just seems kind of mad. But we just don't understand the culture there. Let me just see. Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, had something to say, which seems odd. I mean, but I suppose when a high profile person is killed, political people have to come out and say something. He said, "My thoughts and prayers go to the family and loved ones of Charlie Kirk after his horrific murder in Utah. We are thinking especially of his wife and young children today. There is no place for the gun in politics, no justification for violence in democratic debate." And I mean, that's the argument that a lot of people are making. You know, he spoke a lot about freedom of speech, and this will continue now because what the right will say is that his freedom of speech was curtailed because he spoke openly, he had opinions, he had strong opinions on homosexuality, on trans, on the availability of guns, all of those sort of right wing beliefs, and he was very strong on them and very forceful on them. But it just now they will say, well, this is the left being violent and killing somebody. This is about freedom of speech. The one thing I'd like to point out is that if we look at the right wing and say ultra right wing countries down through the years, Germany when Hitler was in charge, when he was in charge, when he got the gig, Mussolini, when a country, and this is the way it's going, and we should remember this, when a country becomes a right wing, when a right wing element takes charge of a country, when you've got a right wing party in charge of a country, what they will do then is, I mean, the right wing now in Ireland and in the US are talking about freedom of speech. What they will do is they will shut down freedom of speech. There will be no freedom of speech. And we've seen this historically. We've seen who Stalin, who Mussolini, who Hitler, and Stalin, you could say, is extreme left, but he's so far left, he's right. We can see who they locked up. They silenced journalists, they silenced the media, they controlled the media. They locked up thinkers, teachers, lecturers, writers, poets, artists. That's who they locked up because they didn't want freedom of speech. So even though, if we look at the Graham Linehan thing that happened last week, yes, we could say it was a bit heavy-handed that he was arrested at an airport, but a lot of people are saying that's about freedom of speech. It wasn't really. It was about a law that the UK have that you can't, incite violence over social media because you will be arrested. That's what it was about. But this idea, the freedom of speech, and that's what's happening. We are, you're not, you can't say anything anymore. That's not true. And also, if we do go down the right wing route, we have to look at how that played out historically. It does not lead to freedoms. It leads to dictatorships and clamping down on freedoms, not just for the people that they decide to other, like, say, for instance, in Hitler's time, it was people of a Jewish faith, it was people who had physical disabilities, it was Romani gypsies, like they were the others. And then we talk about the artists and the poets and the writers and the teachers and the thinkers and the philosophers and all that. Those were the people he othered, and they will be, it's not just them, it's the general population. And also, if you look at what's happening in America, that Trump is saying, "Oh well, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment. The Ministry of Defense is now the Ministry of War, so at wartime you can't have elections." Or, is he looking to form a dictatorship? So these are things we just need to be aware of. Let's have a look at some of Charlie Kirk's views. If I can just play a clip here.
You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe.
I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the
you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have done that before. That's not an immediate. No, you wouldn't have done that before. That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
It is the reality the left has created.
You truly, in your heart of hearts, truly believe that this is a human being. This,
without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
This is a dolphin fetus.
So let me.
Without a doubt, a dolphin fetus is a human being. This is a human fetus. Look how similar they look, but quite different. Dolphin.
There you go. I don't know what the point of him mistaking human fetus for dolphin fetus is, but that's quite interesting. Quite an interesting man. Very sad. We don't celebrate the death of anybody. Interestingly enough, though, the amount of headlines this is garnering. He was shot once, and then we look at how many media outlets mentioned the little girl in Gaza who was shot like 160 times, and nobody really mentioned that. Anyway, that's the world we live in. So yeah, and we move and we see, and hopefully, I mean, there will be fallout from this. The left, it's at all times we need to look at how these things are dividing us as people, and that is the will of some people. They want to divide us. Ireland may boycott Eurovision 2026 over Israel's participation. RT has announced that Ireland will not participate in the 2026 Eurovision Song Contest if Israel is allowed to compete, citing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. That's good news, isn't it? RT say it would be unconscionable for Ireland to take part under those circumstances. The decision hinges on what the European Broadcasting Union decides. And here again, we'll see the right and the left having different views on this. So there was a lot of people calling for Ireland to not take part in the Eurovision Song Contest because of Israel. Now that they've made that decision, you'll see people saying, well, what about, freedom of speech? And there will be a reaction. You can't do right for doing wrong. So you have to understand RT's predicaments sometimes. And finally, Maria Steen, I don't know if you've heard of her before. She has secured, sticking with this whole, right-wing watch out. She secured backing to enter presidential election. Conservative to enter presidential election. So Conservative campaigner Maria Steen has reportedly obtained the support of 10 Oireachtas members, TDs and senators, enough to move toward nomination in the upcoming presidential election. Known for her opposition to a number of social referenda, and you make up your own mind on these things. We're just here to deliver the news. She is in opposition to abortion, family and care, same-sex marriage. Her potential candidacy is already stirring debate over social values and cultural shifts in Ireland. That is it for our news in brief. Right, let's talk to Philip O'Connor, if he is there, about the state of Irish football, the controversies in women's football, the enhanced games and media control in boxing. Freedom of speech, they say. Philip O'Connor, how you doing, man? Philip, I don't have your mic at the moment. Is that just me, or is that?
I believe it's his end.
Oh, have you? Can you have a look at your mic situation there, Philip?
How's that? Is that better?
Oh my God, the voice of the great Philip O'Connor. It's great to hear your voice.
The voice of reason. Here we are.
And what is it you were saying?
Freedom of speech, and I'm just waffling away, and nobody's listening. That's my use of freedom of speech for this Friday morning. Great to be back.
They shut you down. They shut you down. You're welcome back, Philip. What were you saying?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that you can't go anywhere without that freedom of speech debate cropping up. It doesn't matter whether it's in presidential elections or in American universities or in sports. It's absolutely everywhere. And it's one of those things. I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about it again.
Let's start with the football. The rock bottom says this headline, RT, rock bottom not there yet, but it's coming, says Owen Doyle. Then there's, we can talk about I suppose that maybe briefly the Northern Ireland Stadium funding. And this is interesting. There's 200 full-time coaches in Croatia. Ireland has 10. That is damning. Wexford FC head of football has said, I don't know if you saw that headline, but basically saying we do not have the infrastructure. We are in this place because we didn't capitalize on past successes, and we did not put them. Where did the money go, Philip? What is going on with Irish football? I mean, I was gobsmacked. I mean, hats off to Armenia, but like they really went for it. But God, Ireland were all over the place. You know, they did not, like you talk about Ireland not taking part in the Eurovision because of Israel's involvement. It looks like Ireland have stopped playing football because of Israel's involvement in.
I find
maybe
it really
some
interesting.
sort of protest, is it?
Yeah, at this early stage to be boycotting the 2026 World Cup in the way that Ireland are doing, it's an interesting stance to take. I don't think it has much to do with free speech, and I think it has an awful lot to do with some of the issues that you touched on there, Keith. The truth is that Irish football is sick. It has been sick for a very long time. We're seeing it both in the men's game and in the women's game now, that the same things are affecting what's happening off the pitch, basically, is affecting the results on the pitch. It's not just decades of underinvestment and the fact that, Irish football has always sort of outsourced the development of players to English clubs. That was always what happened. When we were younger, we would have played with fellas who were going over to Bolton and Blackburn and Arsenal, Liverpool, Aston Villa, and that was where they received their footballing education. They started on the parks in Fairview and Tala and in Mayfield in Cork, and then they were finished at 15. They went over to England to become the players they were. That's not sustainable in the modern world, and it hasn't been for a long time. And we're now staring at a situation where the only person born in Ireland who could play at the next World Cup in America and North America next year is Pico Lopez, who plays for Shamrock Rovers and for Cape Verde because his father's from there. And he'll be the only one of the Italia 90, USA 94 generation to be at that World Cup. And to be honest, it's just... like I've been beating my forehead bloody off the table talking about these things for so many years. But Owen Doyle, the man who has the strongest glutes in Irish football, what he's saying there is correct. We haven't yet reached the bottom, because there's still a ways to go, but we're not far off. So on the one hand, we have the great work being done by clubs like Shamrock Rovers, who are doing so well to get to their Europa League every year. But without that infrastructure, and infrastructure is not just money, right? Infrastructure is not just coaches either. What we need to do is basically an entire root and branch destruction of the FAI and start all over again, because the place is full of people who are brilliant at putting out PowerPoint presentations and making announcements in the media, but their actual delivery for Irish football is bottom of the league.
And they're losing money. They're in debt as well. I mean, like, where did it all go wrong? I mean, you and I grew up in they were heady days. We thought this is it. This is the start of it. We're going to go to be in World Cups regularly. This is this. And also, I mean, if we look back we can look back now at Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane and go, oh my God, those were the salad days. You know, that's amazing that we thought how bad we thought they were and how much people wanted them out and how well they did when in retrospectively.
It's mad. Like, you know, be careful what you wish for, I think, is the thing with Irish football. But I think you have to go back to how there's been a professionalisation in the Irish game, right? Now, there was always a few quid to be had playing in the League of Ireland. It wasn't much money, but a fella would get a brown envelope and, you know, maybe 20, 40 quid for playing a game, 20 quid for a win, tenner for a goal, that kind of thing. But the professionalisation of the Irish game has actually been damaging to it, because what it did was it's attracted like an entire universe of bluffers who come in there with their suits and their lovely knotted ties, right? And their Canva PowerPoint presentations. And they say, this is the pathway to Irish football. Take these steps and you will be successful. And that'll cost you 200 euros an hour for my consultative expertise, right? None of them have had any idea what they've been talking about, right? Irish football is unique, right? The culture of Irish football is unique. The fact that we lived in the shadow of England for so long and that so many of our players went over there is unique, right? We didn't have a professional league. Now we have a more or less professional league. We didn't have that until very recently. So people coming in, particularly from outside, and we've seen it with, you know, a Dutch influence in the FAI. We've seen it with a British influence in the FAI now, where you've had Mark Canham, you have Carla Ward coming in, you've Haime Hallgrimsson. I've been to the island where he's from and seen how they do football there. Fascinating man, a great coach in that. But not even he, you know, a dentist from Vestmannaeyjar can sort out this Irish team. And believe me, it's like watching pulling teeth when they play. But when you watch these things, Keith, and you realize how badly things are being run, because not only are they now doing, you know, not doing the things they're supposed to be doing, they're actively doing the wrong things. So if you look at this whole idea of academies and of, you know, they talk about contact time on the ball and everything else like that. The only problem is that there's very little science to back a lot of these things up. We have one of the leaders in the field of youth development. And I'll actually, when we're done talking today, I'll pass you on his number so you can get him on the show. Mark O'Sullivan is a Cork man, played for Cork City. He was a brilliant musician, music producer, won Grammys here in Sweden. But he's also associate professor of football at the School of Sports Science in Oslo. And for about 20 years now, I've called Mark O'Sullivan the John the Baptist of Irish football, because he has been standing shouting his truth in the desert and literally everybody has ignored him. Now, Barcelona haven't ignored him. The Canadian Football Association haven't ignored him. The Australian Football Association haven't ignored them. And all of them are doing pretty okay because they're listening to his thoughts and his opinions and his research primarily about youth development. We have, as I said, a unique culture in Ireland when it comes to sport. We have Gaelic games, we have rugby, we have every sport, golf and tennis and everything you can imagine, and soccer, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to look at what has been done in Clairefontaine in France and in La Masia in Barcelona and said, we're going to copy and paste that solution into an Irish context. You cannot do that. It's like taking a Word document and trying to copy and paste it into Google Docs. We all know the pictures aren't going to look right at the end of it, right? And this is what we need to do. We need to stop. Mark is an extremely difficult individual to deal with. He drives me mad every single day. And yet I've never come across anybody who's more right in what they say. And not only that, but it's backed up by research as well. So, but the FAI doesn't want to know. What they want to do is they want to be able to go into government buildings and say, here is yet another PowerPoint presentation that we pulled out of our arse on Canva this morning. Give us more money for academies, right? That's great. I will happily give clubs money for academies, but I want to know what the plan is. I want to know what they're going to do. How are you going to deliver me 11 players? I only need 11 of them to start for the Irish men's team. How are you going to deliver me 11 world-class female players to start for the women's team? That's what I want to know. And the other thing I want to know is, how are you going to deliver me as many Irish people, men, women, boys, girls, pensioners, playing football as often as possible for as long as possible? Because we have so many people, and you come across them yourself. I've played with them, you've played with them, we played against them. People who went over to England and came back failures in the eyes of Irish football, in the eyes of, you know, the Leinster Senior League and schoolboy football, that kind of thing, who simply never played the game again. These are people with enormous experience, people who've trained with David Beckham and Ryan Giggs and Roy Keane and that kind of thing. And they came back to Ireland and we call them failures. And we were like, oh, look at your man. Yeah, you're not a Manchester United anymore. This kind of attitude. It has to stop. We have to change the way we think about football and how we measure success. And we are not going to do that by putting the same people in place or the same kind of people or the same kinds of thought patterns in place again and again and again. Any success we have in Irish football is despite the FAI and not because of it.
Mm. What happened in the 80s? What happened? Was that just street football? You know, lads that were used to being out in the street and playing against older lads and just were tough and like, where did that come from? Because surely, I know, I mean, as an Athlone town man, we had some fantastic nights playing against European opposition in St. Mel's Park, and it was a heyday for the domestic league. But the players we got, and Jack Charlton obviously knew what he was. Obviously knew what he was about. But what happened there without the structure? Why are we looking for a structure, and why can't we replicate that now? And I know we don't have the players playing at the same level, at least not in England, but they are further afield.
Yeah. Well, there's actually been a sort of an arms race in football in recent times, Keith, and you will have seen it yourself that, you know, as soon as things like St. George's Park opened up and Lillis Hall and places like that in England, when they sort of started to formalise football and education and concentrate resources on things like that, that never really happened in Ireland at the same time in the same way. So the best footballers that any of us have ever seen have come from the favelas of Brazil, right? You're talking about Ronaldinho, you're talking about Pelé, you're talking about Garrincha, players like that who came from absolute poverty, but who simply played the game from morning until night. And it was seen there as being a sort of gateway out of poverty. I've been in Recife in northern Brazil, and I played football with teenagers who were the national futsal champions. Futsal is five-a-side football with a slightly heavier ball. It's a difficult game to play. And my God, I was like the roundabout in Fairview Park. Just, you know, these kids were just running rings around me doing it. And it was fascinating to see how skillful they were. There was very little formal coaching. In the day I spent at that club in Recife, I didn't see a single cone and I didn't see a single whiteboard or a single iPad while I was there. I simply saw kids playing football and a guy with a whistle very occasionally stopping the game and saying, you missed that. You should have done this. You should have done that, right? But Ireland has fallen behind in the formal education of players. And because of that, we've kind of gone the other way. And this is why they talk about academies, while relevant, it's also misleading, right? Because if I bring in a player, say if I bring in my daughter or your son, and I say, right, we're going to do a drill now. You're going to run to that cone. You're going to stop the ball and run back. I have never, and I've covered thousands of football matches as a professional sports journalist, I have never seen a cone on a football match, on a football pitch during the 90 minutes, right? It doesn't happen. What I have seen is a fella from the Balkans there who has played football and basketball and handball and water polo. I've seen a young fella who's been looking after what he eats. I've seen a young fella who probably has a Marlboro after the game, and that's the only vice he has. But this guy has played football, or he's played some sort of ball sport pretty much his entire teenage years or his youth years or that kind of thing. We're not doing that. So now what we're looking at is we're saying, you know, Damien Duff spoke about bringing kids to run up and down hills at 6 o'clock in the morning and train and that kind of thing. Sounds great. They're dedicated to the game. In truth, most kids would go, why am I doing this? And just pack it in, you know. We're doing the same thing in rugby where we're creating a strata at the very top of elite players. But even in the elite players we create, Keith, and this was very, very relevant when you look at the game against Armenia, right? What Ireland lacked was people in the middle of the field, right, in the engine room of the game who could make a decision quickly, right? And that is the difference between elite sport and everything else. I played against Robert Pires, who played for Arsenal and who played in Spain and won the World Cup with France, right? And the difference, one of the main differences between me and Robert Pires is the speed at which he thinks, right? I literally cannot keep, before the ball's even passed to him, he knows what he's going to do with it. And I'm still standing there going, okay, what happened there, right? And that's the thing that we're not learning now. And the reason we're not learning that is because the context we're learning in of, you know, it used to be called covert coaching after the Dutch company that ran it, where it was very much individual technique training. You know, they throw 50 balls at you, take it down to left foot, pass it back, take it down to right foot, pass it back. That is no use to you when Robert Pires is coming up your butt, right? This is the things that we need to be looking at. And I think there's a sort of a wider discussion around sport and health and young people and self-confidence and mental health and all of these things. And we really have to start there. What is sport for? What do we want to get out of it? Do we want to get to World Cups? I would say absolutely, because you and me remember that time of Italia 90, Euro 88, USA 94, the World Cup in South Korea in 2002. And indeed, you mentioned Martin O'Neill there at Euro 2016. These are great times for the nation. But the only way to do that really is not to look at what other people are doing, because of course you can take inspiration from others. But this is Ireland, right? We're a tiny little island off the coast of Europe. We've the same population as a Denmark or a Croatia. We are a multi-sport nation. We just don't play the same sports that they do. So rather than looking to these places for inspiration, we have to understand our own sporting cultural context and start to develop our own solutions, right? We cannot expect Britain to develop our players for us anymore. We cannot expect somebody to fly into Dublin with a PowerPoint presentation and fix these things. And that is where we need to start. And we also need to sideline the professionals, right? The people who come in and who talk a great game, and if any amount of communications advisors tell them what to say but not what to do, right? Because some of these things are deeply unpopular. A lot of people don't like the idea of not having league tables for kids and that kind of thing. None of that matters. These people's opinion, they don't matter. What does science say? Okay, what do winning nations do? What does science say? How does science tell us to create the best footballers, the best athletes, or the healthiest people that we can possibly create? Start there and only there, and that's the beginning of the end of the solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like the things that we've known Irish teams in the past for, which is like, obviously the great phrase, put them under pressure, aggression, physicality. We may not have been the most skillful team, but teams did not fancy coming to place because we would get stuck in, and that just isn't there. I mean, you look at that team the other night playing against Ireland, and you were going, these guys are we watching Brazil? But Ireland backed off and just never got close to them, never laid a finger on them. And we're not touch tight if you have a good coach, that's what he'll say to you all the time, touch tight. So then very sort of quickly then the women's game, then we have a legal case by Eileen Gleeson, claims of unequal pay, resource shortfalls. I mean, the women's game is a great opportunity for the FAI because we're looking at it in rugby. We're looking at how, you can, if you invest in the women's game, you can get like three times. Like the men's game is quite saturated when it comes to rugby, when it comes to football. The women's game is a real opportunity there for companies, for brands to get involved and to really make to get the brand. There's money to be made in the women's game. The FAI. I mean, surprisingly enough, they're kind of messing it up a little bit, aren't they?
I don't think it's one bit surprising, because if ever there was an organization that would trip itself up, it's the FAI.
My sarcasm is too dry.
Exactly. Even for me at this hour of a Friday morning, but you're entirely correct. And the thing, we're in danger now of the train leaving the station in women's football, and we're not on it.
And we've talked about this before,
already happened, because I was in Switzerland for the month of July at the Women's Euros, and my days were spent driving from just outside of Zurich to talk to all manner of people, players, coaches, going and seeing the games and that kind of thing. And we're doing the same thing. We're producing players who are not quite there. We obviously have Katie McCabe, a Champions League winner at Arsenal, and that, but we're lacking players in the top teams. There's no Irish player, Chelsea, for instance, who's in with a shout there. There's a couple of Manchester City younger girls who are on the bench and that kind of thing. There'll be a lack of Irish players in the Women's Champions League, which is expanded in a different format. We need to deal with those things. But even there, we're starting to make the same mistakes, because you have a situation whereby girls are starting to get this into their head now that they're playing for Ireland, that you haven't made it. You haven't done anything yet. And to get back to Eileen Gleeson's situation, Eileen Gleeson has forgotten more about football than I will ever know. Yeah. Eileen Gleeson is one of the most qualified and the most intelligent people when it comes to football in all of Ireland, woman or man, right? There's nobody who can hold a candle to Eileen Gleeson there. And the way she has been treated by the FAI is a disgrace, right? Hamer getting 650,000 a year and Eileen getting 100,000 a year. It is a complete black and white case of the only reason that Eileen is getting that little money from them in comparison to Hamer is because she's a woman working with women's football. There is no defense otherwise. The FAI has zero defense, and that is a case that they're 100% going to lose. But it also comes down to the resources for the women's game. The fact that the girls have to share hotel rooms when the men all get single rooms. All of these kinds of things have to change. But what we really need now is we need people who think differently. We need people who can who haven't been there for 20, 25 years doing the same things and expecting a different result. And for me, this is most likely going to result in maybe the end of the road for Eileen Gleeson at the FAI, when I would do the exact opposite. I would make her the CEO of the FAI. I would make her responsible for absolutely everything in the FAI. Because if there's one person who's been on both the good and the bad of the FAI, it is Eileen Gleeson. And I would love to see somebody, if not Eileen, somebody like Eileen given a chance to fix it. Because I think that is, you know, there's no quick fixes in this game, but that would certainly help.
Yeah, and that look, we look at I know from coaching underage as well, and the politics between clubs, like at club level, underage level. You're looking at the provincial leagues and all that kind of stuff. There's so much stuff there that and the like little, just men who want to be the chairperson of their club for the rest of their lives, and God help anybody who tries to get in there. We've got all that. We look at Colin Fortune, who did a great job in Athlone with the women's team, and he's had to walk away, and he's saying he just couldn't. And Athlone Town, like if you look at the amount of managers for the men's team they've gone through, and you look at the club and who's running the club, it's the administrators that we need to look at. And as you said, can we just stop playing football tomorrow and then start like a brand new league and everybody involved and just call it something completely different and invite the footballers back and say we're sorry and get Eileen Gleeson to run everything. I'm going to have to get you back. The enhanced games we'll talk about again, the boxing. So like, can you give me a couple of lines on what's happening with the media and boxing? I know maybe we'll talk about it again.
Yeah, well, let's just talk very briefly now, because Terence Crawford is fighting Canelo Alvarez tomorrow night in Las Vegas in an absolutely huge boxing match. But what's happening in boxing has always been a rotten sport, as we all know, right? But what's been happening in boxing lately is that certain journalists are not getting accredited to cover the fights anymore. And the reason for that is the Saudi Arabian influence, right? So you have sort of co-promotions going on, and journalists apply for their accreditations. And sometimes one promoter will say yes, and then all of a sudden they'll hear from, the Saudis that, no, this guy isn't it. And no reason is given. But an awful lot of journalists who will be critical of Saudi Arabia's involvement in boxing are not getting to cover the games. And if we want to talk about freedom of speech, and if we want to talk about journalism and that kind of thing, it's something that I definitely think that you and me can revisit. But just keep that in mind now when you're watching the headlines coming out of Las Vegas this weekend. Are you getting the full story? Unless you're getting both sides of it, you're probably not.
Yeah, and we've always had issues with judges as well down through the years, especially we've experienced in the Olympics and stuff, and question marks over that. I mean, we can't really have, there's questions over boxing. It needs to do better. It needs to have transparency, or it's going to fail. I believe. And look, having money does not equal, and having power, and power does not equal free speech. Just for anybody watching, Philip, thanks a million, and good to talk to you again, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks very much for having me, Keith.
Cheers, man. Good luck. There you go, Philip O'Connor, talking about the state of Irish football, and it's just bureaucracy. It's administrators getting involved. Like it's a power thing, and just it's not about the football anymore. And we've had some great footballers down through the years, it's just that journalist, what was it, Owen Doyle, saying we haven't reached rock bottom. Holy moly, that's not good. I don't like that. I don't like to hear that. Stop saying that, Owen. I don't like it. Okay, let's welcome in Gemma. Gemma, I've asked you to come on. I gave you I didn't give you much notice, Gemma, so I really appreciate you coming on. Let me just do this little intro that I have written here. So earlier on the show, we spoke about the killing of U.S. conservative activist Charlie Kirk, shot while speaking at a university event in Utah. The assassination has sparked huge debate about political violence, about the language of free speech, and about what happens when culture war politics moves from the internet into real life. And of course, for us here on the island of Ireland, these themes aren't far away. The rhetoric of Trump and MAGA has travelled. Make Ireland great again. Have you ever heard that recently at all? Sounds terrible, doesn't it? I do not want to go back to the past or where we were. You can see it in parts of loyalism in the north, where identity, grievance, and global culture wars are mixing in a potent way. To help us understand these connections and to talk about violence towards women especially, culture in the north, and her new debut novel. I don't know if it's linked in any way to what we're going to be talking about, but she can tell me more. I'm joined by writer and former journalist from Newton Arts, better known as Goodwill Hunting. Will I call you? Is it Gemma? Is your mic on there? I can't seem to. Okay.
Can you hear me? Is that okay?
There you go. Absolutely.
Okay.
Perfect. Cool. Am I right in saying Gemma?
Gemma. Yes, that's fine. That's my name.
Goodwill Hunting. I do like that. So for people outside Northern Ireland, can you paint a picture of loyalism today, what it represents, how it operates, and how it sees itself, and what's the purpose of it, to be honest?
I mean, I suppose the purpose of it really is that they want to, maintain that part of Ireland, the island of Ireland, to be part of Britain. But I think today it's become very interlinked with the sort of MAGA rhetoric that we're seeing coming from America. What is important to realize is that loyalists are kind of the OG, like they're the original MAGA, and the people who are the MAGA in the States, a lot of them have their lineage is Ulster Scots loyalists. So what we're seeing kind of a global movement now, this patriot, they're calling themselves patriots, and obviously we're seeing it in the Republic as well. They're all coming together under this banner of patriotism, but it's really Ulster loyalism, and that we've been seeing in the North for hundreds of years.
So like, yeah, well, let's look at the history. You're talking about people who left Scotland, who left the north of Ireland, the north of Britain, north of England, Scotland, whatever. That part. Are we talking Presbyterian? Are we talking Protestant?
Yeah.
They were loyalists, basically loyal to the crown, is what we're
Yes.
saying, and
Yes.
and they want to be part of Britain and England and all this kind of stuff. And we're talking about flag waving and and they went to a certain part of America and they set up organizations. And maybe somebody might suggest the KKK might have come from
Yeah,
some Irish
absolutely.
people that or Scottish people that went over there, and now it's coming back. And we are looking at some of the funding as well, aren't we? Like behind what we're seeing, like what happened in Ballymena, you could say, well, that was just sort of like just happened. That was a lot of youths, and we know from our history in the north of Ireland, it's never just someone's handing the rock, someone's organizing the youths to throw those petrol bombs, to throw those rocks, to start those riots. It's happening again in Ballymena, and this time, I mean, it was for a long time, the Irish Catholics. They were the others. Now they're othering all of the others that aren't loyal to the crown, aren't white, and a lot of the time aren't men. I mean, everybody's suffering up there except the men who want to run the place.
Yes, and it's essentially a sort of Christian, at the core of their ideology is a Christian ethno-nationalism. So they, like you say, they want everyone to be white, Christian. They hate gay people. They hate people of color. And we've seen this in the North for, like I say, hundreds of years. And with this new wave of patriotism, they are getting bolder. They have always, put Catholic families out of their homes. They have always came out in the streets, obviously, in July and March and season, and waved their flags and chanted hate. But they are becoming more and more emboldened now. We are seeing in Ballymena, like you say, children are being put out of their homes, people of color are being put out of their homes. Obviously, we saw it was in Dublin where that little girl was, attacked in the street, assaulted, essentially sexually assaulted in the street by teenagers. And whenever you speak about the funding as well, it's the same sort of Christian nationalists that are doing that, and it goes right across the board. And I think what's strange that's happening now is that, yes, it used to be Protestants and Presbyterians, but it doesn't really matter to them now. As long as you are sort of a mouthpiece for their ideology, they will get behind you, and there will be a space for you in their movement, regardless of where you sit sort of on the sectarian divide. And that's what we're seeing now in the Republic with, these people who are coming out and calling themselves patriots. They are coming out with American flags. It's not the sort of the same manifestation of loyalism that we saw in the North, but this new kind of wave of patriotism, it's all coming together under one.
Yeah, I mean, it's worrying when you see Confederate flags flying, and I mean, in the UK we've got the Reclaim the Flag, the Georgia flag being flown by people. It's all sort of the same movement, and then
Yeah.
you've got to look at the people behind this. You got to look at what previous convictions. We look at what happened in Ballymena, and what they were saying was, we are here to protect our women and children, and it turned out that, I don't know, something like 30 to 40% of the people who were there burning people out of their homes had previous convictions for assault on women.
Yeah.
And
that's not a shock.
That's not a shock. No, but tell me about this shocking statistic in the north of Ireland, where, I mean, it is one of the most dangerous places for women to live, not with immigrants, with their own brought up second, third, fourth, fifth generation from the north of Ireland, and it's let's be clear here, it's not immigrants, it's not delivery drivers who are delivering fast food, it's not the Filipino guy who works in the hospital who can't understand what the hell is going on because he's just trying to get on with his life. It is white men who are there for generations, and they are the husbands, the sons, the brothers, the uncles of the women of the north of Ireland, who are probably suffering the most of all the people in the north.
Exactly. And you said something interesting there. You said the sons. And something that we've seen recently, which is really alarming and shocking, is, whenever you think about violence against women and girls, usually two things come to your mind. There's either the, boyfriend or the husband who's, a drunk and he comes in and he's attacking, right? Or, somebody's been dragged down an alleyway and they're being brutally attacked. That's generally where people go. What we're seeing recently is men killing their mothers. That has happened in the north. Sons killing their mothers. And I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but in like the last year or so, femicides that have happened, there's been a real increase in sons killing their mothers. So this violence against women and girls in the north is coming from all angles. But something I think is crucial to mention is that it is also coming from the state. If you look at someone like, say, for example, Jeffrey Donaldson, right? These men are not coming out to, in anger and protest of what he's done. The state in the north is set up to protect these men. Our criminal justice system does not protect women. We see suspended sentences being handed out all the time. And a suspended sentence, just for your listeners' context, basically means that you've committed a heinous crime. You're getting sent back out into the community. And if you do something else again, well, then, okay, we'll bring you back in and we'll go through the whole court system again. But there are offenders who are being sent back out into the community after almost murdering women. And this is happening time and time and time again. And until we tackle this issue of the actual state, it's essentially state-backed violence against women. Until something changes within that system, the men are going to keep doing this, because what they're hearing is that it's okay, it's decriminalized. If you said to someone, if you're caught with a big bag of drugs, all you're going to get is a suspended sentence, well, you would just walk around the street carrying your big bag of drugs, because sure, what does it matter? And we're saying that to men whenever they attack their mums, their partners, and it's being decriminalized. And until that is taken more seriously, we're going to keep saying this.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about deflection, isn't it? Because if we look at the anti-trans thing, I mean that baffles me, because I'm like, how many of these people have actually got a trans person in their life, a friend? How many actually met them and talked to them and spoke to them? And because it's like saying like all gay people are the same. Like everybody is an individual. Like it's this obsession with what people might or might not be doing in the privacy of their own home when they go to bed at night, or do in the kitchen. I don't mind, do wherever you want. But what I'm saying is the obsession with the sexuality of other people. This anti-trans thing is crazy, because when you think about it, you're talking about keeping women's spaces safe. Why would somebody go to the bother of dressing up as a woman, pretending to be a woman, living their life as a woman, just so they could get at and attack women, when they can do that anytime they want and not really get in trouble for it? It doesn't make sense.
It's all projection. That's what I think it is. And I get a lot of these kind of comments all the time on social media from men. And I see it as projection, because what they're telling me is that if they were allowed to go into women's toilets freely, they would be attacking women. That's what
they're
I'm
thinking.
hearing.
That's what's going to happen. That's what
exactly.
I do.
That's what they're thinking. Because they're thinking that's what I do. And it all comes down, a lot of it comes down to projection. And the same thing goes, you just mentioned there about like LGBT rights and stuff as well. To go back to this kind of patriot movement, they are absolutely obsessed with sex, with sexuality. And there's a really funny stat, which is that Ards, Carrick, somewhere else, these are all kind of like the loyalist stronghold towns in the north, they have the highest purchasing of sex toys in the UK. So these are people who are completely and utterly obsessed with sex, right? But at the same time, they're completely and utterly demonizing anybody who expresses themselves, whilst behind closed doors, look at Jeffrey Donaldson, they're perverts behind closed doors. So it's all projection. That's all I ever see it as. It's projection, and they're letting us know what they would be doing if they were in that position.
So why is the Venn diagram this puritanical, like, Christian, outwardly, it's about how you look when you turn up at, church on a Sunday, or, how you look when you turn up for your local gathering, or march down the street, and how outwardly how you look. And then behind the scenes, you're drinking too much, you're abusive, you're angry, you're frustrated. Like, this is not look like, I mean, this is dressed up then as patriotism and, pointing at everybody else. And so what is this whole anger, frustration? Like, where's it all coming from? Like, these are of traumatized people that just need to go to see a therapist.
Yes. I think, I mean, so much of it just comes down to disenfranchisement. Like, if you think about in the context of the North, these people have been here for hundreds of years. They've not really, I mean, I'm half Protestant, half Catholic, right? People are mixing, but a lot of them don't. And the people who go out into the street and enact the violence are often living in, like council estates that have been really, like, I mean, the funding is gone from them. There's no community centers. When I was a kid, we had a youth center, we had a community center. Those are gone. They've been decimated. So you have people who are completely disenfranchised. The education system is failing them as well. We still have academic segregation in the North so you can go to your 11 plus, you can go to your grammar school. If you don't, you go to a high school, and some of them are great, obviously, but a lot of the time they're telling you, right, well, you can be 3 things. So we are telling kids from no age at all, this is what you're good for. You are good to be scum. That's essentially what we're telling them. And then people are growing up seeing that around them, seeing this environment that tells them that they're nothing. And they are then perpetuating that onto other people. And, it's very easy to point the finger and say they're stupid, whatever. But actually, like you say, they're a traumatized people. And I don't know what the answer is, like you say, therapy, maybe. I don't know what the answer is, but they need to be given resources to feel like they contribute. When men in particular feel like they are contributing, they're much less likely to enact violence against women and girls, for a start. And a lot of them, you'll see these videos of these groups, these vigilante groups going around, and they're walking around. I've been watching the live streams, and they're walking around the town. They're smoking their fags, right? No shade, right? Everybody loves a cheeky cig, but they're walking around smoking their fags, just screaming at people left, right, and center. They want a sense of purpose. They want a sense of purpose, and they want to feel like they're contributing. And I think they're turning. I mean, we've seen it for hundreds of years in the North, but I think they're turning to this new form, this new manifestation of violence, to feel like heroes.
Yeah, and part of something, and part of a
Part of
movement, and
something,
part of a
exactly,
group.
yeah.
It's why people sign up to biker gangs or cults, or you look at the Crips or whatever in America. It's why people, because they feel disenfranchised. They want to be part of something. They feel like no one cares. And if you're talking about no one caring, like the loyalists in the north of Ireland, I mean, the ultimate in no one cares, because like they're loyal to the
Exactly.
crown and to the establishment of Britain, who just does not care, and they're the jilted lover, and they're giving everything, and they're screaming and telling the establishment how much they love them and how loyal they are, and they're not even getting a second look, and nobody is investing in their communities. And you look like a band like Kneecap, which is demonized, but like when they won that money, they gave half of it to the to the people on one side. Now, not that there are sides, but like that's how it's reported. So this is what we need to be aware of, and it's the same in, we need to be aware of this in the Republic as well, in the UK as well. If you are disenfranchised, if you're not getting investment in school, in education, in facilities, you were in the same boat as anybody who's just arrived here from a war-torn country, and they're trying to make, like, these people should be banding together. But it would seem like, if you were a bit of a conspiracy theorist, you might say, well, this is good for the establishment to keep everybody arguing with each other and not looking up,
Absolutely, absolutely. And something I just want to add to this as well, is that a lot of these people are feeling emboldened because they are seeing online these views that they hold, right? But 71% of online engagement in Ireland, in the whole island of Ireland, is from bots. In my accent, it's funny to say that.
bots,
BOT,
yeah,
bot accounts, right? It's not real people. So you might be you might be one of these fellas sitting on your sofa, right? And you're going on to TikTok and you're seeing 50 comments said, yeah, we need to get out in the streets, we need to get these people. And you think, great, I'm going to join them. But all those comments are not real. Now, you could spend hours talking about who's creating these accounts, but these people are being emboldened by, and they love to say everything is misinformation and everything is fake news, but you can look it up. There's been studies to prove it. 71% of what they see is not real, and so they are being told in an algorithmic vacuum that their views are totally normal and that loads of other people have them, and they don't. And the vast majority of people in the island of Ireland, and this is what's quite sad about it as well, because so many people around the world now are looking to Ireland and going, what the hell's going on there? Why is there so many racists and everything? But actually, we have been such a welcoming island. Irish people have stood with oppressed people for centuries. But these views that these people think everybody else holds, they're becoming more normalized, and that's emboldened them to go out. But it's really important to remember that actually a lot of these comments that you're seeing online are totally, totally fake.
I've noticed, and I've watched your stuff on TikTok. I've noticed a lot more women speaking out like you
Yeah.
are in this fashion. You're not, necessarily taking sides. You're not, it's not venom. It's almost, it's just facts, and I see a lot more female commentators commentating on this stuff. Do you think that the women of the north of Ireland hold the key to the future, and maybe we just
Always.
need to move men, just move aside? Can you just let the women do some work here? And it would, I mean that sincerely.
Mhm. Well, I mean, if you look at the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, right? They came together. It was a political party that came together across the sectarian divide. They did not have a position on whether or not we should have a united Ireland, whether or not the North should be, which country it should be a part of. All they were concerned about was when the Good Friday Agreement was being drafted, they were like, wait a wee second, you aren't talking about women and children here. And they came together and they got that on the agenda. That we need voices like that in the North. And I think what happens is a lot of the time, if you come out and you start talking about gender-based violence or whatever, people go, oh, this lefty nonsense. They think of it as this sort of like, you've got your, no shade, but you've got your septum piercing and you're a vegan and all this. And it's like, no, these are normal people. We are all normal women who care about this. I go out with my nanny all the time and she's talking to me about, the violence that she used to see, women coming into the shirt factory with their black eyes 50, 60 years ago. It's generational and it's normal women who are speaking out about this. And we need more women's voices on these topics, because without women in the picture, it's just going to perpetuate the same violence that we've been seeing, since hundreds of years.
Yeah. And I think, I do hope, I do see it more now. I see women just coming out and speaking, and I think social media is helping that as well. And you can see the difference. I'm not saying there aren't male voices in saying what you're saying, but you see more and more female voice. And I think you're just kind of like enough is enough. And also very educated women as well, and they know their stuff, and they're well read, and they're taking the time to notice, and the awareness is there as well. And possibly like some of them might have gone to see if they needed some therapy or something, which men generally don't do. So what are the similarities you see between MAGAs, like, say, for instance, Stop the Steal narrative in the US, the loyalist reactions to Brexit, the protocol, the question of Irish unity? Like, so what's this like make Ireland great again? Look, what is this? I mean, I used to work on radio, and we say, oh, if we're stuck for something to talk about, we'll talk about, something in the past, like sweets we used to like, or TV shows we used to, favorite TV theme, whatever, it was easy. It was like people looking back at the past with rose tinted glass and thinking everything was great. Like, Ireland was terrible in the past. Let's be honest. It's great now. So what is this thing about going back to the past when something was something? What is it? More white, less brown people? Is that essentially it? It's a racist thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's essentially what it is. It's go back to a time where we were more white. And I think the commonality with the sort of the MAGA and what's happening and this kind of make Ireland great, which is, like I say, it's the disenfranchisement, it's a manipulation, but I think it all comes down to Palestine at the end of the day, because Palestine is Irish solidarity. Palestine, it's robust internationally. Everybody knows that Ireland is a stronghold for Palestinian solidarity, in our government and everything else. And so whatever state you want to look at, see that, right? And they see that Irish people are standing with Palestine. If you flood the Irish internet with loads of anti-Palestinian sentiment, as well as this kind of make Ireland great again, as well as this patriot movement, as well as racism. Also, you'll notice a lot of the comments that you see are specifically, they are Islamophobic, right? So there's a huge interconnection between sort of Islamophobia, anti-Muslim rhetoric, and then also kind of veering Ireland away from being a stronghold of Palestinian solidarity. And I think it's really important to kind of draw, all of those things together, because it is definitely making the Palestinian solidarity movement seem a bit more, quote, leftist, and you'll notice as well, whenever you see these protests all around, a lot of the kind of anti-fascist protests will have the Palestinian flag, understandably, but they'll have the Palestinian flag and they'll maybe have some other flags. They tend not to have the flags of the state, whereas the anti-immigration protests will be out with the flags of the state. And I think Irish people should be using our flag at our anti-racist protest, because it is Irish to be anti-racist.
Oh, totally. I mean, the use of the tricolour. I mean, you know, it's like if anybody should take back the flag, it should be the people of Ireland. The
Exactly.
good,
It belongs
caring,
to us.
people with empathy. There's a man who died recently who said that empathy was a bad thing. Well, people seem to be showing him a lot of empathy at the moment. It's that idea that we empathize with other people, and that's what the tricolour represents. And even the green, the orange, and the white in the middle. That's what we're saying. We're saying this is an island for everybody. And we've always said that. Like, it doesn't matter what your religion, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter your background. We want to create an island that is welcome for everybody. It's the very basis of our flag. The white in the middle is peace. We've got the orange and we've got the green. And people like, wake up, people, sheeple. And that's it, and we really do, and it's the same. It's happening the same with the George's Cross. And then you look at somebody, and you're looking at this movement, and you're going, "What's going on with this?" Like, when you look behind it, and then you realize this guy is like literally something stupid. Like, this guy makes flags, and he's making loads of money out of it, and he's promoting it. Like, it is so. A lot of the time, it's so dumb. And then you've got to look at places like the State of Israel and how good they are on social media. You've got to look at, don't be an idiot. Don't be a useful idiot. Don't be responding and being garnered and being energized by a bot. It's not a person. There's nobody there. It's a machine. It's a state. They talk about, these same people were talking about COVID and how we're all going to be like robots, and we're going to be chipped, and we're all going to be the same. We're all going you're doing that.
Yes.
You're creating that fact by not wanting a diversity in your community. You are putting yourself in a pen, and you're creating. It's like you're willing this into existence. I cannot get my head around. There's so many contradictions within what they're saying, and it's just horrible. And I feel sorry for a lot of these people.
Yes, exactly. I feel sorry for them as well. And I have people like this in my family. Like I say, I'm half and half. So I know these people really, really well. Something else, because you were saying there about sort of, they're being encouraged to sort of behave like this, but they're also being encouraged to get out of other platforms. So they're using things like Telegram a lot of the time. They're using sort of small WhatsApp groups where Truth Social, obviously, as well. I joined Truth Social and in the most recent election there, and a lot of their news, a lot of their information comes from memes. Truly, if you go onto Truth Social, it's just a stream of memes. So they're getting bite-sized information that it's being written to them in very basic language, and they are essentially trying to, they're brainwashing people, which we have seen in the North. If you want to learn about patriots, if you want to learn about MAGA, speak to people from the North of Ireland, because we have seen these flags on our lampposts for hundreds of years. I have seen with my own eyes the swastika on one lamppost and the Israeli flag on another lamppost. These people do not understand, and this isn't in a condescending way. They just fundamentally don't understand what it is that they're talking about, and then they're getting all of their information from a Telegram chat or from memes, and they're not getting any global context. And like you say, I do feel sorry for them. Now, I wish they wouldn't go out and harm people, but at the same time, they are being pushed into being this way. Nobody chooses to be this way from birth, and it's going through the generations. We're seeing kids 12, 13 being brought out by their dads into the street. So they are literally breeding more foot soldiers of this rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I suppose more and more people, it's energy. More and more people need to be outspoken I think that, middle class, comfortable, white, we tend to think, oh, that's not really, I'm not political, I'm not going to say anything, but you are literally being political by not saying anything, and you're allowing it to happen. But look, we'll see how it goes. And this idea of freedom of speech, I mean, we've seen how it goes. We've seen how, right-wing states, you see what Hitler did about freedom of speech. If that's the way you want to go, then, do a bit of research, read up on what happens when a state becomes a fascist state. It is not about freedom of speech. And that's a lie that has been spoken about a lot. Very quickly then, tell us about your book, Influenced. Is this about any of this stuff? Is this just stuff you talk about and write about? Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, long story short, I wrote some articles in 2020 called Let's Talk About Grammar Schools, Rugby and Rape. And because the grammar schools, so I'm very interested in the way that middle class men maintain, like I said, about, the state, how middle class men maintain this violence through, judges, through the police, through, our elected officials. And so, yeah, my novel is kind of about growing up in the North. But one of my characters is a manosphere. He's plugged into the kind of alt-right world. He listens to these podcasts, but he's middle class. He comes from money, and he's a rugby player, and his parents sort of protect him, and he's not a very good man. But crucially, his dad is there's a chapter in my book called USA, Ulster Men Started All. So I've been looking at this kind of angle for like a good few years now, because I've heard people say the North should be the 51st state of the US. These people have held this sentiment for years. They are obsessed with Andrew Jackson. They think he was, the best man ever. And I mean, he had hundreds of slaves. So these people have been like this for a very, very long time. And that's kind of what I wanted to write about in the novel. And I will just say, it sounds super serious, but it is fun as well. I wanted to write about women who are happy, who have fun, who have the crack, and not just kind of, really depressing, because it gets too much sometimes.
Well, Influence is out. It's available to buy in shops online.
No, it's not yet.
Oh, when's it coming out?
I don't know. I need to get an agent.
Well, if you're an agent and you're watching this, come and have a
up.
go. Yeah. Well, listen, I look forward to it coming out, and maybe we should chat again when it comes out,
yes.
and we'll definitely get you back on again. Thanks a million. Goodwill.
Thanks so much. Have a good day,
Gemma.
Bye.
Take it easy, and thanks a million. And that was I did ask Gemma to come on, and it was short notice, and she was in the gym, and she got herself home and ready, and I really appreciate it. But we will definitely talk to her again. That's it from us, from us, and for us. There's a lot going on. It's a crazy world out there. Just do a bit of research. Don't just look at a meme and believe that it's factual. Don't be a useful idiot. Don't let people who have really bad motives, and it's usually money at the end of these things. I mean, we talk about people getting into power so they can bring just bring the NHS down or dismantle the NHS so that American businessmen can come in and set up their health insurance companies and make money. And there's stuff behind all this. This isn't conspiracy theory stuff. Just be educated and don't be a useful idiot. And I don't want to call anybody idiot, but that's just a term that's used. That if you don't, if you carry on this fake news and this propaganda, then that's just literally what you're doing, and you're not helping anybody except people who are already making money and don't need help. That's it from us. Thank you very much to our contributors, to Philip, to Gemma, to anybody, to the guys here in Brown Bear Studio. And we will be back next Friday. Keep an eye on Moth at all times. Never take your eyes off it. We're on Instagram at Moth_news. We're on YouTube at Moth_news, all caps, and on X at Moth News. And you can go back and watch all our old interviews and show your friends, and support independent media. Have a good day. It's Friday. Enjoy the weekend. Sure, look, everything's grand. Don't worry about it. Good luck.